other PowerPoints on other books. So I went ahead and did this for you so that you can see some of the things. There are more things as we go through that I'll probably add to this, but for right now, this gives you like a good kind of idea of how some things in book 1 kind of show up again in book 7. They look similar. So in book 1, it's Lily that really saves Harry. She's the one who sacrifices herself. This is Lily, his mother, sacrifices herself to save Harry's life. And she casts an very old spell in order to protect Harry. And Harry's protected all the way until the end of book 4 in that Voldemort can't physically touch him. In book 7, it's Narcissa Malfoy that saves Harry. Okay, there is a scene at the very end of the book where she makes a decision, and she actually knows that Harry is alive, but she tells Voldemort that he is dead. And so by doing that, she actually saves Harry, which is unheard of. When you get to book 6, at the very beginning of the book, Narcissa Malfoy makes a deal with Snape. And part of this is Narcissa's trying to save Draco. And she actually does by what she's doing. And she goes behind the Death Eaters and Voldemort's back in order to save Draco. And it's really quite beautiful because she also casts a spell just like Lily did. Okay, so Narcissa Malfoy becomes an important character in book 6 and book 7. Hagrid delivers Harry on the motorcycle in book 1. Hagrid takes Harry for the very last time from Privet Drive in the last book. He's the one who takes Harry back to out of Privet Drive. He almost swallows the snitch in this book 1, and then in book 7, Harry has to use the snitch that he almost swallowed. He is in a turn of events, and I will tell you for some of those who don't know, Harry inherits the snitch. Somehow or another, it comes back to him, and he has to actually touch it with his mouth, his lips, to get this. We don't know, but the snitch can open. Okay, and it's a way that he gets something that helps him win in the end, right? And it's bequeathed to him. Harry has no knowledge of being a wizard in book 1. He's learning the way, and he's kind of a little bit lost, but he's got a mentor. Harry starts learning about Horcruxes and the Deathly Hallows in book 6 as he's being trained by Dumbledore. But in book 7, he is really on his own, and Harry makes a very, very important decision whether to hunt for the Horcruxes or hunt for the Hallows. He decides to hunt for the Horcruxes instead, but he has no idea how to do it. And that becomes kind of like hard for Ron to deal with, because he figures that that Dumbledore would have told him how to do it, but he had not been fully trained by Dumbledore. So he's kind of on his own with really no knowledge. He's just guessing, right? But of course, the plot turns, right? Harry goes to Gringotts in book 1, and Harry goes back to Gringotts in book 7. In book 1, he goes to his vault, and we also see that what happens with the other vault in Gringotts. In book 7, he doesn't go to his vault. He goes to the vault of Bellatrix Lestrange, and he gets in that vault. But he gets in that vault with the same exact goblin that we met in book 1, Griphook. So Griphook is the one who opens his vault, and then it's also Griphook who opens Bellatrix Lestrange's vault. So I'll have to add Griphook there. In book 1, we see that Harry does have some strange dreams and visions, always a splash of green light. And in book 7, he has the same thing. He knows more now what it is, and he uses it to his benefit, right? And I don't want to tell you what the dreams and visions are because that would spoil. I'm trying not to spoil book 7, so I'm trying to be really careful in what I say to you all, because book 7 is so good. It's Neville at the end of this book that we're going to see today, that Neville is the one who wins the House Cup because Neville was the bravest, and we'll look at Neville's character development in this book. In the book 7, it is Neville that actually defeats the last Horcrux. He is the one, and it's different from the movie. He does do exactly what he did in the movie. He kills Nagini, the snake, but in the book, it's set up a little bit different, and it's Harry who tells him, you must kill the snake. If I can't do it, then you have to do it. And Neville agrees to do it. So it's Neville who does it at the end, and kills the last Horcrux. And he does it with something that, with the Sword of Gryffindor at the very end. So he kind of like wins as well too. In book 1, we get to see that Harry is trying to protect the Sorcerer's Stone. They realize that must be what's being protected under Fluffy, the 3-headed dog. And in book 7, Harry inherits as well, inside that golden snitch, the Resurrection Stone. And you will see that this is really important in book 7. And he doesn't use it to resurrect anyone or himself. He uses it to talk to the dead. And so he uses it to talk to his parents, Sirius Black, as well too, and some other people that die along the way. And he talks to them, and he uses that in order to gain strength for the final battle that he has. All right. So that's kind of like how the books are kind of slightly mirrored, as well too. So the other part as well too is just the idea of Harry's journey beginning and ending, and starting. It kind of all starts at Hogwarts and it all ends at Hogwarts, his journey. He also, I think it was Yvette the other day that somebody mentioned in class that Harry's parents were killed at Godric Hollow, and Harry goes back to Godric Hollow in book 7 to see his parents' grave. So that's really another way that we have that similar idea, that where his parents died and then where Harry ends up. Any questions on this? Does that help you a little more to kind of understand this mirroring? And I'll do the same thing with Chamber of Secrets, book 2 and book 6. I'm adding a slide now to make things a little bit more clear. What do you guys think of this idea of mirroring? Did anybody know about it? Okay, so only Valentina's answering. Anybody want to? You can turn off your cameras, but you can put on your audio. Okay. Okay, so a lot of you didn't notice it and didn't know about it. Okay. Yeah, it took a little bit of work. I found it through research. I kept doing a lot of research on the books, and somebody mentioned it in, I don't know, some peer-reviewed article, and then I just dug into it. Oh, I like that, Kaylin. I like the idea of a Venn diagram, how everything interconnects. Right. Part of it is that Rowling is also using something that we don't really see as much in this book, but it starts to really be clear in book 4, the idea of literary alchemy and the idea of circles, right? And so the snitch is an example of that we see this circle, and circles are never ending, or like a ring. And this is actually very common in literature, the idea of circles, trinities, threes, triangles. These work in literature because a triad always works better to have that. And it's a structure that you can use in writing the literature. Knowing that, you have to remember, Rowling has a degree in classical literature and language and Latin. So she's studied a lot of probably British and European literature, maybe even some American literature. And so this is common. How many of you have read or watched the movies The Lord of the Rings? Oh, I like that point that Francis has in Gideon the Ninth. Okay, biblical numbers to spell messages throughout her book. Okay, so if you've seen The Lord of the Rings, the idea of that ring that they're trying to protect, that Frodo is trying to protect, that ring is that circular. That's like our snitch, right? Our snitch becomes that ring. And in book 7, we realize that snitch says, I open at the close, right? And so it's kind of a riddle, right? But it can only be done in a particular time. And it's also I only open when it closes. And that means I open at the end. And so what that close is the end, right? The same thing for that ring in The Lord of the Rings. That ring represents a circle, right, of power that needs to be destroyed in The Lord of the Rings. Notice that it's this circle of power in The Lord of the Rings. In Harry Potter, the snitch has the resurrection stone in it, which is also grants you a lot of power, right? And it's one of the Deathly Hallows. So the resurrection stone, the cloak of invisibility, and the elder wand give you the resurrection stone. I'll give you the 3 Deathly Hallows, and that is in the story The Beetle and the Bard, which is later on in the series. So the idea of circles, we'll talk about that when we get to book 4. I'll do a whole thing on literature and alchemy, and I'll give you a reading on it as well too. Okay. Hold on. My husband is off today, but he's forgotten that I have class. So I'm gonna just text him and tell him I am in class. Leave me alone. Okay. All right. So we're going to go back to what we were doing. We're finishing chapter 12. We finished that, and we should be getting to now the end of the book. Okay, so one of the things we haven't really talked about is this subplot with the Sorcerer's Stone. The subplot becomes then the detective story, right? This is the mystery that we need to solve, right? So as you're going through, you're trying to figure out, well, what's under the trap door that Hermione's like, well, there's a 3-headed dog, but look what it was laying on, a trap door. They start looking for information on Nicholas Flamel. And there's actually a chapter, chapter 13, which is called Nicholas Flamel. And so they start to try to put the clues together of what's under the trap door. Harry puts the clue together like, oh, well, we went, Hagrid went to Gringotts and got something for Dumbledore, right? That's a big piece of it as well too. And then they start thinking about, what does Nicholas Flamel do? And then they realize it's the Sorcerer's Stone. So chapters 13 through 17, we talked about the Mirror of Erised. Chapter 13 says these are the last few chapters, and then we are done. So part of this subplot is to find out what the Sorcerer's Stone is, why it needs to be protected, and why do these children feel like they need to help Dumbledore, right? That's a big part of it. They think that they need to help and that this has been dropped into their lap and they have to help. So the big thing that we need to think about is Neville. Before we get started, is Neville. When we can start with Neville. At the very beginning of chapter 13, Neville has a run-in with Malfoy, and he shows up at the Gryffindor Tower with a leg locker curse on him, and he's been jumping all the way through. Of course, it's Hermione, and she performed the counter curse. And it's Ron who said to Neville that you've got to stand up to Draco and his thugs, right? And he says on page 218, Hermione says to him, "Go to Professor McGonagall," Hermione urged Neville. "Report him." Neville shook his head. "I don't want more trouble," he mumbled. "You've got to stand up to him, Neville," said Ron. He's used to walking all over people, but that's no reason to lie down in front of him and make it easier. "There's no need to tell me that I'm not brave enough to be in Gryffindor. Malfoy's already done that." Neville choked out. So this is exactly what Harry was concerned about when he was sorted, right? When he was sorted, right? He was like, he didn't want Slytherin only because of Malfoy, right? But he didn't choose Gryffindor. He would have taken anything except Slytherin, and he ended up in Gryffindor. And it's probably the same thing for Neville. What do you think Neville was saying in that sorting hat? Do you think Neville was saying the same thing, not Slytherin? You think it's the same thing? Yeah, I think Neville was saying kind of the same thing. Like, I don't want to be Slytherin. Maybe because he knows the Malfoys. Harry did not grow up in the wizarding world. And I think Neville, many people have said that Neville should have been a Hufflepuff. That he would have been better as a Hufflepuff than as a Gryffindor. But when we start seeing Neville Longbottom's character growth, we realize that he is actually very brave. Yes, Stephanie. And so we need to watch Neville's character growth. When Professor Hernandez at Wolfson campus, one of the first times she and I spoke about the Harry Potter series, about teaching it. Professor Hernandez teaches the Harry Potter series at Wolfson sometimes. Professor Surrendar has a Gothic literature class at West, and she does book 4, I think, in the series. And then I just teach the whole series here. And I think Professor Sendon teaches part of the series in her Lit 2480 at Padrone campus. So one of the things she told me was that she thought Neville Longbottom was going to be important in book 7, and you don't see it in book 1, but that's why the book 1 and book 7 are the mirrors. So when she and I first started talking about that, I'm like, well, they're mirrors. So if book 1 and book 7 are mirrors, it's important that Neville also be in book 1 and be prominent in book 7, right? And this just tells you the extensive amount of detailing that Rowling put into the book. So poor Neville is worried about it, but it's Harry who says, "You're worth 12 of Malfoy," Harry said. "The sorting hat chose you for Gryffindor, didn't it? And where's Malfoy? In stinking Slytherin." Neville's lips twitched a weak smile as he unwrapped the frog. "Thanks, Harry. I think I'll go to bed. Do you want the card? You collect them, don't you?" As Neville walked away, Harry looked at the famous wizard card. "Dumbledore again," he said. "He was the first one I ever..." And then this is where they get the clue about Nicholas Flamel, right? Because they've been looking in the restricted sections. They've been trying to get to find out who Nicholas Flamel is. So it's the only no maker of the sort. So there's another text, right? So I wish that they had put the frog card that's on the screen in the book. Like if they had shown us the card, I think that would have been even better. I think in some version of this, it would be nice if they did that. I do know, have you guys seen the illustrated versions of these books? The new large, they're like large, they're beautiful. I'll show it to you. So they've done these illustrated versions, and it's the whole story, but every single page has tons and tons of pictures, and they put all the pictures in. So this is great if you're probably a collector. Let me see if I can find you guys a nice picture on the internet if you haven't seen them. They have them all the time at Target. You can tell that I look, right? What I need is somebody to like buy the book and then donate it to a Goodwill so I can rescue it. So they're really quite, I don't want to go to the website. I just want to show you the pictures. Anyway, they look, I'll show it to you right now, you guys. Let me share my other screen. This one. If you haven't seen these, it's this one. There's an illustrated, they're already in the books 1 through 3 are in this format. And each one of these has beautiful, beautiful pictures on the inside. And here's a picture of what it kind of looks like. I don't know if that's the right one. I don't think that's the right one. More like this, right? And they're all illustrated. And so it has like, it would have the chocolate frog probably in it. So they're really quite beautiful. That's what we need. In this edition. So they're really expensive though too, those books. They're beautiful. I don't own any of them. I think my husband would kill me if I got one. I already have my Harry Potter series, and then my books are getting old, so like this is all taped up, and I have replacements. I go to Goodwill stores, and if I find Harry Potter books, sometimes I give them to my students on campus. I gift them a book because I have extra ones of Harry Potter paperbacks. So when I grab them, I give them away or let students borrow them. So anyway, the chocolate frog tells them who Nicholas Flamel is, and then they know that it's, of course, it's Hermione who said, you know, oh, I know this, right? So so it tells them Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. That's at page 219. So then we get the ancient study of alchemy, right? Alchemy here is not literary alchemy. This alchemy here is the actual, what do you guys know about alchemy and what it is? So alchemy is the study of metals and liquids that you can create elixirs from in the wizarding world, but alchemy actually exists in our world, right? And that's where we can use alchemy to take metals and separate them and then get the most purest form of the metal, right? And that's how we get like gold or titanium, things like that, is through alchemy. So, but alchemy has also been part of the wizarding community for a long time. Okay, so let's skip up now to page 223. In page 223, we actually see Neville being brave, right? It's now I believe they are at Quidditch, right? And Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle are making fun of Ron, right? And Harry. You tell him, Neville. Longbottom, if brains were gold, you'd be poorer than Weasley. And that's saying something. Ron's nerves were already stretched to the breaking point with anxiety about Harry. I'm warning you, Malfoy. One more word. Ron, said Hermione suddenly. Harry. What? Where? Harry had suddenly gone into a spectacular dive, which drew gasps and cheers from the crowd. Hermione stood up, her crossed fingers in her mouth, as Harry streaked toward the ground like a bullet. You're in luck, Weasley. Potter's obviously spotted some money on the ground, said Malfoy. Ron snapped. Before Malfoy knew what was happening, Ron was on top of him, wrestling him to the ground. Neville hesitated, then clambered over the back of his seat to help. Come on, Harry, Hermione screamed, leaping onto her seat to watch as Harry sped straight at Snape. She didn't even notice Malfoy and Ron rolling around under her seat and the scuffles and yelps coming from the whirls of fists that was Neville, Crabbe, and Goyle. So there is Neville's moment, right? He finally gets his kind of like redemption to being brave. And this is the first time that Neville actually stands up for his friends, and he becomes really solidified as part of that friend group, right? Eventually the friend group expands over the series. So it's Neville, it's Ron, Hermione, and Harry are the first group. Then it's going to be Neville and Ginny. And then we're going to add Luna Lovegood later. Okay. And we add Luna in book 4 and 5, right? Actually, more like book 5, but she becomes part of the friend group. So that's a really important, that because she's with them, and she's with them for book 5, 6, and 7. We see Luna Lovegood in the series. And Luna, do you guys know what house Luna is? Yeah, Valentina, you've got it right on the idea of alchemy. I'm just seeing some of I need to expand my chat window so I can see these comments. Yes, Luna is a Ravenclaw, but she's really special. And she's smarter than people think. And she becomes important in the end of the series as well, too, because she's the one who talks to Harry about death as well. So, all right, we get Neville, who has become, what is the theme, right? So now we see how Neville's character grows throughout the series. What themes does this signify? Look at pages 223 and 224, 243 and 272. Neville becomes braver as he goes. And the theme that we start seeing, I think it is also part of the hero's journey, Stephanie, that Neville is going through a character growth. Just as Harry's going through character growth, Neville is as well too. And we could almost see that Neville has his own like small hero's journey throughout the way. He's just in that secondary character mode, right? He's not a first character. He's not a tertiary third level character, but he's a secondary character. And he shows up throughout the series to help Harry or to be with Harry. So this becomes important. Okay, so let's talk about who is Norbert. Who is Norbert? It's Hagrid's dragon. How does Hagrid have a dragon? What was the process of getting Hagrid's? Can somebody tell me? Verbally, orally?
He won it at a card game in a pub.
Mm-hmm.
Which is foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is foreshadowing how Quirrell learned to get past Fluffy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this is Hagrid's dragon. wins a dragon egg that he's baking in his kitchen, and it's born. Okay. And so Hagrid is not, it's illegal to raise dragons, but he's always wanted one. But this scene about the dragon, him growing one, always kind of reminds me of the Loch Ness monster. You know how people see, like, like Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Do you guys know those legends or those myths? They're more modern mythology. But there's supposed to be a lake, I think it's in Scotland, and it has a Loch Ness, like a creature living in it, and there's like these grainy black and white pictures of this Loch Ness monster. And there was even a film about it, and there's been all kinds of things, but it is I believe in Scotland, and you can see that there's these pictures of it. Okay, that they say these are creatures that's living in there. It's the same thing with Sasquatch, right? Bigfoot. People keep saying that they see those in North America, that there's a big giant Bigfoot living in North America. And I always think of Hagrid in this moment, having gotten a dragon that's illegal. In fact, we find out that it is Ron's brother who is working with dragons in like Romania, right? And he tells them like this is illegal, right? And so, what they're over at Hagrid's hut looking at this, but Malfoy is outside of Hagrid's hut looking in, and he also sees the dragon, right? So, and then Hagrid decides to call the dragon Norbert because he feels like it's, and he thinks he's the dragon's mother, right? That he's his mommy. So they're all, he says, Ron is the one who comes up with the plan. Ron says, look, you can't keep this dragon. You need to send it to Romania. And my brother Charlie can come get it. And he studies dragons. So he says on page 236, we could send Norbert to him. So Ron says he's going to write his brother and get the dragon set. So Ron does, and on page 237, again, we have a letter within a letter, right? It says, Dear Ron, how are you? Thanks for the letter. I'd be glad to take the Norwegian Ridgeback, but it won't be easy getting him here. I think the best thing will be to send him over with some friends of mine who are coming to visit next week. Trouble is, they mustn't be seen carrying an illegal dragon. So he says, can you get the Ridgeback to the tallest tower at midnight on Saturday? They can meet you there and take him away while it's still dark. Right. And so Charlie and Ron have a plan now. And I think that one of the things that people miss in the movies of the Harry Potter is that Ron actually has good ideas. It's Ron who decides, hey, you can't keep him. There's a law that says you can't keep it. He knows the law. Charlie has his work studying them. I'll write him. He's like, and we'll get this resolved, right? So we also see Ron's character growing. As well too throughout the text. In the movies, Ron is seen very much as just a sidekick. Why do you think, why is it that in the movie he's just a sidekick, but in the book he has more, like he seems to be like smarter? In the movies he doesn't seem as smart, does he? Why do you think that is? What happened between the book and the movie?
I think that the movie did that so that the audience would focus more on Harry.
It's a good answer. Yeah, I think Samara is right too, more of a sidekick, best friend type. And which is why a lot of people, when Ron eventually ends up with Hermione at the end of book 7, people are like, no, but in the book it makes sense. In the movie, it doesn't make sense, but in the book, it makes sense as well too. Yeah, and I think you're right, Natalie. That's a good answer. I think the way they needed to play into their character archetypes more. So they leaned in hard with Ron not being as important. Um, yeah, I think you're right. It's more of an exaggeration of him being a sidekick archetype than being anything else. It's Harry who seems the smarter one with Hermione as well too. Um, the poor Norbert bites Ron before the end of this. So this is all getting complicated, right? And they all decide to do this. Ron can't go because his hand has swollen so much. He'd had to go to the medical office, right? And it's, I mean, the cut had turned a nasty shade of green and everything. And they figured out that Norbert's fangs were poisonous. That would be bad. Okay, so who takes Norbert to the tallest tower of Hogwarts? This scene is not in the movie. Harry and Hermione. What tool do they use to get up there? What magical tool do they use to get up there? The cloak. Yes. Okay. So Hermione and Harry go get Norbert. They take him up there under the invisibility cloak, and they get up there and they get in trouble. Okay, so they left the invisibility cloak there, and they headed and they got in trouble. So, but also did also Malfoy got in trouble. Malfoy was there telling them about what happened, right? So Professor McGonagall gives them all detentions. 20 points from Slytherin, wandering around in the middle of the night. How dare you? You don't understand, Professor. Harry Potter's coming. He's got a dragon. What utter rubbish. How dare you tell such lies? Come on, I shall see Professor Snape about you, Malfoy. But Harry and Hermione get in trouble as well too. Now, in the movie, who goes to the Forbidden Forest?
Harry, Ron, Hermione.
Yes, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Draco Malfoy in the movie go to the Forbidden Forest. But in the book, who goes to the Forbidden Forest for punishment? Which is, I don't understand how this is punishment.
It's Neville and Neville, Draco, Hermione, and
Harry, right? So this is again how they've taken Ron's character and should put him in as the sidekick in order instead of Neville, right? I think it would have been important to again see Neville in the Forbidden Forest because he has character development. Now, this trek into the Forbidden Forest is for something really nefarious. It's really a bad scene there, right? So even Neville got caught in this whole thing about the dragon. So they all head to the Forbidden Forest, and page 250, 249, 250. One of the things the kids learn is there are consequences for rules being broken, right? Draco is upset that he goes, I'm not, Malfoy now turned to Hagrid. I'm not going in that forest, he said. And Harry was pleased to hear the note of panic in his voice. Yeah, if you want to stay here at Hogwarts, said Hagrid fiercely. You've done wrong and you've got to pay for it. But this is servant stuff. It's not for students to do. I thought we'd be copying lines or something. If my father knew what I was doing, he'd tell you that's how it is at Hogwarts, Hagrid growled. Right? So copying lines, what's good in that? You're somewhat useful, or you'll get out. If you think your father rather you were expelled, then get back to the castle and go unpack. Go on. Malfoy didn't move. He looked at Hagrid furiously, but then dropped his gaze. Do you notice that what the amount of disdain Draco has. He says this is servant stuff. It's not for students to do. What do you guys think about that? What level of privilege Draco has? So Draco is wealthy, right? The Weasleys are not. Harry didn't grow up wealthy. Harry has money in his vault, so he doesn't have to worry about money, but he doesn't take all his money. He didn't realize he grew up poor because the Dursleys kept him humble, right? So this is the moment where you really see the difference between Draco and Harry. And they set Draco up as this antagonist to Harry throughout the series. So Draco is one antagonist, Voldemort. Even Lucius Malfoy becomes Harry's antagonist, right? And these are important. These are all these male men, right, who go up against him. Right, and they do have certain. We're going to talk about that in book 2, the idea of servanthood and how that works, what servanthood looks like now, what slavery looks like now compared to what slavery looked like back then, and also over world history's time, right? So slavery and all that, we'll cover that in book 2. But we see that Draco pushes this concept of privilege. I'm privileged. I have servants. I don't do that stuff, right? Which means Draco doesn't clean. He doesn't do anything where Harry cooked and cleaned and kept the Dursleys' house. And he was basically their servant in the house that he lived in. Okay. Why are they going into the Forbidden Forest? Why would you send children into the Forbidden Forest? Because that was one of the rules that Dumbledore gave at the beginning of the school year. First years are not to go into the Forbidden Forest. So why would they be sent to the Forbidden Forest? Yeah, scare them, psych them out is Samara's, okay? Yeah, their punishment was to go find basically a dead or dying animal, but they're doing this at night. Why couldn't you do this during the day? Right? Like sometime in the afternoon, but they're waiting till the nighttime to send them to the Forbidden Forest. So, what we see here, okay, is definitely a sense of intimidation. They had classes during the day, maybe. Yeah, they did, Stephanie. So this is what they have to do. Look here, said Hagrid. See that stuff shining on the ground? Silvery stuff? That's unicorn blood. There's a unicorn in there, been hurt badly by someone. But this is the second time in a week. I found one dead last Wednesday. We're going to try and find the poor things. We might have to put her out of its misery. And what if whatever hurt the unicorn finds us first, said Malfoy, unable to keep the fear out of his voice. There's nothing that lives in the forest that'll hurt you with me or Fang, said Hagrid, and keep to the path. Right now, we're going to split into 2 parties and follow the trail in different directions. There's blood all over the place. It must have been staggering around since last night at least. I want Fang, said Malfoy, looking at Fang's long teeth. All right, but I warn you, he's a coward, said Hagrid. So Harry, and Hermione will go one way. And Draco, Neville, and Fang will go the other. Notice that Draco and Neville go together with Fang. So again, another nemesis is Draco to Neville, obviously, and they get to put together. Now, of course, Neville is stronger than he was you know, in now that he's had a fight with Crave and Goyle, so he's a much braver person. So let's talk about the unicorn. What do we know about the unicorn, and what it does?
It can sustain life for a little bit.
It can sustain life for a little bit. It's not easy to say. Hagrid tells them it's not easy to catch a unicorn. They're powerful magic creatures. But he's never seen one hurt before. Okay, so they're powerful magical creatures, and is the most innocent of creatures. Okay, now we run into a centaur in the forest, right? Hagrid, Hermione, and Harry run into a centaur. And what's a centaur? Half man, half horse. Yes. Okay, we're gonna go back to the unicorn in 1 minute as well too. We run into a centaur, so we have this kind of like horse theme going. Horses throughout world history are important creatures. They've been domesticated somewhat, but a horse is considered a very majestic animal throughout world history. You had to be wealthy to own a horse or have some kind of access to a horse, because horses were, you have to feed them, they were expensive to keep. And so, and they also have to be tamed. Now, we do have wild horses in the United States that were brought here from Spain. And the horses that we have in the United States came from the Spaniards and from the Europeans that colonized this continent, right? And so a lot of those came that way. There were some other wild horses that the Native Americans had, but many of them were captured because the Spaniards had landed in Mexico and those horses got away, and the Native Americans also used the horses. Now, centaurs are half man, half horse again, and they're very, very proud. Okay, so, and they do not want to be ruled by anyone. So we meet Ronan, and we meet Bane as well too as a centaur. So we meet that there is a kind of a group of centaurs living in the forest too, and they are also looking for what happened to the unicorn. Okay, so one of the things Hagrid tells us about the centaurs is that they're half human, half horse, but that they are very they watch the stars, and they have kind of an intuition, and they have kind of like a sense of prophecy to them, right? So they kept going through the forest, and they learn when they also meet Firenze, another Ben's a centaur, and they learn on page 258 why unicorns are important. And this is one of the quiz questions, right? It's Mr. Tumnus from Narnia. Yes, Elizabeth, like Mr. Tumnus. Mr. Tumnus is half man, half goat. Isn't he half man, half goat? Mr. Tumnus, I'm not sure. I think he's half man, half goat. A satyr, yes. I don't know. You have to check on that. You have to Google him. Okay, so a unicorn. So they can use the tail hair in wands from a unicorn, but the unicorn has to give it up willingly. Okay, and they have used unicorn horn and tail hairs in potions class as well too. And then we learn from Firenze that's because it is a monstrous thing to slay a unicorn, said Firenze. Only one who has nothing to lose and everything to gain would commit such a crime. The blood of a unicorn will keep you alive, even if you are an inch from death. but at a terrible price. You have slain something pure and defenseless to save yourself, and you will have but a half-life, a cursed life from the moment the blood touches your lips. Okay, so there's a little foreshadowing here. Okay, but really we are getting a deeper thought than that. It's like, it will keep you, what does it mean that you will everything to gain, right? It's only one who has nothing to lose and everything to gain would commit such a crime. What does that mean? Nothing to lose and everything to gain. The person who's taking that blood has probably already lost it all, and they're probably dying. And that's another good point too. They could be blinded by ambition, and they've already lost most of their life. So, and once you've taken the blood and drunk it, right? You have but a half life, a cursed life from the moment the blood touches your lips. This is important at the end of chapter 17 when we ask what killed Quirrell, right? It's not just that it's Harry's touch that killed Quirrell and the curse that was saving him, but also that Quirrell was living a half life because his body was already taken over by Voldemort, right? So when we see this at the end, it only makes sense because he's already a cursed life, right? From the moment that blood touches his lips, right? And it's even Firenze who says, it is but Harry stared back at Firenze's head, which was dappled silver in the moonlight. But who'd be that desperate, he wondered aloud. If you're going to be cursed forever, death's better, isn't it? It is, Firenze agreed, unless all you need is to stay alive long enough to drink something else, something that will bring you back to full strength and power, something that will mean you can never die. Mr. Potter, do you know what is hidden in the school at this very moment? The Sorcerer's Stone, of course, the elixir of life, but I don't understand who. Can you think of nobody who has waited many years to return to power, who has clung to life, awaiting their chance? It was though as an iron fist had clenched suddenly around Harry's heart. Over the rustling of trees, he seemed to hear once more that Hagrid had told him on the night that they had met. Some say he died, codswallop in my opinion. Don't know if he'd had enough human life in him to die. Do you mean, Harry crowed? That was Harry, are you all right? So Harry knows Voldemort has been waiting now to get back his body. So between overtaking Quirrell's body, drinking the unicorn blood, and getting the elixir of life, he would then be able to resurrect himself, right? And that's what the elixir of life would do for him. Okay. Now, Harry receives back the cloak that he dropped with a note that says, just in case. All right. This is the last two chapters of the book. Chapter 16, it all moves quite fast. And chapter 16 is when Harry, Hermione, and Ron decide that they're going to go through the trapdoor and save. And they think, who do they think is trying to get to the elixir of life? At first, they think it's Snape. And that's the red herring in the detective novel. There's always a couple clues that lead you the wrong way. So Snape, okay, is set up as being the scapegoat, right? Because of course he hates Harry. And so Harry and them think that it's Snape trying to get the elixir of life to get it to Voldemort, right? They have no idea it's Quirrell. So through the trapdoor is the last level that Harry has to go through in his hero training and encounters. As they are getting ready to go, okay, who tries to stop them? Page 272. Yes, it's Neville Yvette. I should give Yvette points just for always answering. Yvette has been really good today about answering questions. Valentina and Stephanie have been good. Kaylin, you guys have been good at answering questions. Thank you. Okay, so Neville stops them and tries to stop them. He says, on page 272, he tries to stop. He says, "What are you doing?" From a voice in the corner of the room. Neville appeared from behind an armchair, clutching Trevor the Toad, who looked as though he'd been making another bid for freedom. "Nothing, Neville, nothing," said Harry, hurriedly putting the cloak behind his back. Neville stared at their guilty faces. "You're going out again," he said. "No, no, no," said Hermione. "No, we're not. Why don't you go to bed, Neville?" Harry looked at the grandfather clock by the door. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. Snape might even now be playing Fluffy to sleep. "You can't go out," said Neville. "You'd be caught again. Gryffindor will be in even more trouble." So Neville doesn't just stand up to his friends, but he stands up for all the Gryffindors. He decides it has to be him who has to take on this role, right? And so they decide that he's going to be the one to stand up to them, right? Ron tells him, "Get away from that hole and don't be an idiot." And then Neville says, "Don't call me an idiot," said Neville. "I don't think you should be breaking any more rules. You were the one who told me to stand up to people." "Yes, but not to us," said Ron in exasperation. "Neville, you don't know what you're doing." He took a step forward and Neville dropped Trevor to the Toad, who leapt out of sight. "Go on then, try and hit me," said Neville, raising his fist. "I'm ready." Harry turned to Hermione. "Do something," he said desperately. Hermione stepped forward. "Neville," he said, "I'm really, really sorry about this." She raised her wand. "Petrificus totalis," she cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's arms snapped to his side. His legs sprang together, his whole body rigid. He swayed where he stood and then fell flat on his face like a board. Poor Neville, right? Okay, so they go through the trap door after almost being eaten by Fluffy. Okay, they head over there. And they have a few challenges. Here there are 6 challenges that they have to get through. Okay, each challenge is symbolizing one professor. Okay, so the trap door was set by who?
Hagrid.
Hagrid. So that is on the PowerPoint, that's E. The next challenge is the Devil's Snare. Who does that represent? Look at the screen, guys. And this is, by the way, this is a quiz question. So if you get it now, you'll have it for later. Write it down. The trapdoor is Hagrid. The Devil's Snare, according to Yvette, is Professor Sprout. Is she correct? And Kaylin said Sprout as well, too. Are they correct? Okay, the flying keys. Stephanie says you ladies are correct. The flying keys. Who set up the flying keys? No, not Dumbledore. Yes, Yvette, good job. Flitwick. Stephanie, the charms professor. Yes, it was Flitwick. So the flying keys are Flitwick. Okay, remember, he's the one who taught them Wingardium Leviosa. So that's the keys are all flying around, right? So he's the charms professor. Wizard's chess. Who is represented by Wizard's chess? You're gonna have to do elimination. No, it's not
McGonagall.
Snape. It's McGonagall. Wizard's chess is McGonagall. Okay. Potions. The potions test. That is Snape. And then that leaves the Mirror of Erised, which is Dumbledore. Okay, this is one of the quiz sections on that last quiz from Sorcerer's Stone. So you need to make sure you have that. Okay. Trapdoor Hagrid, Devil's Snare Sprout, Flying Keys Flitwick, Wizard's Chess is McGonagall, Potions is Snape, and Mirror of Erised is Professor Dumbledore. Now, this kind of same thing happens in book 4. The challenges in book 4 represent the Hogwarts houses and represent certain professors. And we'll go over that when we get to book 4 as well too. So you'll see that. And then you'll see in book 7 that some of the professors set up their favorite spells and curses in the Battle of Hogwarts as well to protect Hogwarts. And so you're kind of see that Wizard's Chess, being McGonagall, is kind of shown up in the last book when she has the statues, the armored statues at Hogwarts protect Hogwarts at the end of the book. So those are kind of, again, a little bit of a mirror as well too. Okay, so this is important, right? Now, which ones of these do not show up? Which one of these challenges does not show up in the movie? Does anybody remember? The potions. So of all of them, they removed the potions. If the potions were there, right, then I think it would have been really nice, but they were still trying to set up Snape as the one getting to the Sorcerer's Stone. And so they removed the potions, but potions is not in the movie. So let's go through these things. To get through the trapdoor, you have to play music to put Fluffy to sleep. Okay. To get through the Devil's Snare, okay. To get through the Devil's Snare, they had to do a quick spell, right? They had to play Wizard's Chess across the room as well. Okay. And that was Ron who played the Wizard's Chess. Again, at least in the movie, Ron did that as well. Okay. Good. It shows Ron's critical thinking, good problem solver, and strategy. So Ron is not this silly sidekick, right? He has strategy. I mean, I played chess as a child. I was never good at it. My mom taught me how to play chess. My brothers were better at it than I was. I mean, I know the basics of the game, but I was just never good at strategy. So strategy games always get me a little bit. I have to like really work at it. Okay. Then the last thing, Joe Elizabeth Chess is so fun. It can be fun. I don't know. My mom loved strategy games. So she would make us play strategy games, chess, checkers, chess, Risk. We played all those games. My mom loved those strategy games. The potions one, what do we learn is that it's not really a trick. This is an instance where we see Hermione's kind of could have been a Ravenclaw, right? She figured out this riddle on page 285. And she says, brilliant, said Hermione after reading the riddle. This isn't magic, it's logic. A puzzle. A lot of great wizards haven't got an ounce of logic. They'd be stuck in here forever. But so will we, won't we? Right? And so what's the difference between muggles and wizards sometimes is critical thinking. That's what she's saying. Logic. Like, because in the wizarding world, they can just whip it up with magic. But in the muggle world, we have to actually figure out problems to solve situations, right? And so again, notice that there is numerology. It's 7 bottles. 3 are poison, 2 are wine, and 1 will take us safely back through the black fire, and 1 will get us through the purple fire. Right? And it's Hermione who figures it out using logic. Okay? Because it says, right? 2 will help you, right? So again, 7 bottles and 3 being poisonous. That's always not a good sign. Okay. She figures it out. And she says, Harry, she says, you drink that, said Harry. No, listen, get back and get Ron. Grab rooms from the flying key room. They'll get you out of the trapdoor and past Fluffy. Go straight to the Owlery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore. We need him. I might not be able to hold Snape off for a while, but I'm no match for him, really. But Harry, what if you know who's with him? Well, I was lucky once, wasn't I? Said Harry, pointing at his scar. I might get lucky again. Hermione's lips trembled, and she suddenly dashed at Harry and threw her arms around him. Hermione, Harry, you're a great wizard, you know. I'm not as good at you, said Harry, very embarrassed as she let go of him. Me, said Hermione, books and cleverness. There are more important things, friendship and bravery. And oh, Harry, be careful. You drink first, said Harry. You are sure which is which, aren't you? Positive, said Hermione. She took a long drink from the round bottle at the end and shuddered. It's not poison, said Harry anxiously. No, but it's like ice. Quick, go before it wears off. Good luck. Take care. Go. Hermione turned and walked straight through the purple fire. Harry took a deep breath, picked up the smallest bottle, turned to face the black flames. Here I come, he said, and he drained the little bottle in one gulp. Okay, last chapter. The Man with Two Faces. Okay, when Harry gets there, who is not there? No, Stephanie, he plays chess right after the he plays chess to answer your question. He plays chess. They go through, hold on. They go through the trapdoor. Then they go through the Devil's Snare. Then they play chess. No, they go through Flitwicks. Okay. Then they play the Flitwicks, the Flying Keys, right? Where they all have to get on brooms and chase the keys. In the movie, it's just Harry. But in the book, it's all of them. They've got to get up there and get the keys, all of them. Okay. All the little winged keys. And then they play chess. Okay. I actually put it in order on the list on the left. Okay. Yes, and they do play chess at the beginning of the book. Yes. Right. During Christmas, they play chess. So Snape is not there. Who they find is Quirrell standing. Where is Quirrell standing in front of? I don't think I have another slide. I don't have another slide. Got it, Stephanie. Yes. The Mirror of Erised. The Mirror of Erised. So, what is Quirrell trying to do? He's trying to figure out how to do the last challenge, right? So what we find out is this duality of Quirrell, how Quirrell takes off his turban, and we find that he has Voldemort on the back of his head. That just can't be good, right? It's kind of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde moment. So one of the things you have to understand, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was part of the early Gothic literature that was created in the 17 and 1800s, especially the 1800s. We turned to Gothic literature. So this is a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of acknowledgement moment. It's kind of alluding to that. Okay, so you need to think about that at the same in this instance, right? She also later on Rowling alludes to Frankenstein in book 4. There's a Frankenstein moment. And so she alludes to different Gothic novels through the text, and this is one of them. This is actually, the series actually has some Gothic tendencies, but it really, really takes effect in book 4. You really see it clearly. But in the first 3 books, it's lightly there. And this is one of those moments where she's kind of alluding to a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing. So, and the idea of the same concept of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? Mr. Hyde wanted power, right? He wanted control, and he wanted to get rid of Dr. Jekyll, right? But Dr. Jekyll ends up having to kill himself in order to kill Mr. Hyde, right? And so that's also what's going to happen here is Quirrell is going to have to die because it's the only way to get rid of the Hyde in him. So, but we get a kind of a moment of what Lord Voldemort showed me how wrong I was. This is Quirrell. There is no good and evil. There's only power and those too weak to seek it, right? So can you be powerful and be good? You can't. Can you be powerful and be good? Ah, good job, Kaylin. Right. And Dumbledore is. And so this is kind of a reference back to the beginning of the book when McGonagall said, you're a powerful wizard as well too, but you're honorable. Right? So this kind of like goes back to show Voldemort and as a juxtaposition to Dumbledore, right? So this is really a really important quote on page 291. It'd be an interesting kind of like philosophical paper if somebody wanted to write one on like the philosophy of Harry Potter, and this could be one of the aspects on the idea of power and goodness, and philosophically what that means as well too. This concept, this theme of power and goodness also show up in Star Wars. Have you guys noticed that? It's in Star Wars. For my Star Wars fans, would you agree that's also part of it in Star Wars? Yeah, it's really clearly there as well too. This idea that you can be powerful and you can be good, right? And you haven't seen it, Elizabeth? You've really got to get into Star Wars, right? All right, so the Quirrell / Voldemort decides to put Harry in front of the Mirror of Erised, right? And they ask him, right? One of the things that Harry finds out is how Voldemort killed his parents, right? He tells him, don't be a fool, snarled the face. Better save your own life and join me. Why does Voldemort want him to join him? Oh, Elizabeth, we've got to fix that. We'll talk about Star Wars later. I have things to tell you. Okay. Why does Voldemort want Harry to join him? It's like that moment when Darth Vader tells Luke Skywalker, right? Like, you can't, they're going to lose. You might as well join me and be part of, right? Darth Vader and the Emperor, right? We can be better together. Yes. Work together and we can be great together. We could rule the world, right? And of course, he realizes that Harry must have some power that he would need eventually. Okay. And then he says that, that his parents died begging for mercy. Liar, Harry Potter, Harry shouted suddenly, right? So Harry knows this is not true. And he says, how touching it is. I always valued bravery. Yes, boy, your parents were brave. I killed your father first, and he put up a courageous fight, but your mother needn't have died. She was trying to protect you. Now give me the stone, unless you want her to have died in vain. Never. Harry sprang toward the flame door where Voldemort screamed, seize him, right? And Quirrell's hands closed on his wrist at once. A needle-sharp pain seared across Harry's scar. His head felt as though it was about to split in two. He yelled, struggling all his might. To his surprise, Quirrell let go of him. He thinks he's probably true, right? Okay, he thinks he's powerful from surviving him. Yeah, and yes, absolutely. Okay. So we really get to see now, what does Harry stands in front of the mirror of Erised. Okay. And what does Harry say he sees? And he sees, yeah, winning the house cup and just shaking Dumbledore's hand. And so this is where Voldemort says he's lying. Okay. Why does Harry get the Sorcerer's Stone? Why does Harry get the Sorcerer's Stone? He sees it in the mirror, right? That the stone is there, and he sees himself, and then he feels it in his pocket. Harry wants the stone, but he wants to protect it. He doesn't want to use it. Quirrell wants the stone, but he wants to use it for Voldemort. So Dumbledore puts a spell on the mirror of Erised that only somebody who is true and honest can get the stone, who doesn't want to use it. Okay. Do you guys remember in the mythology of Thor and Thor's hammer? What's the mythology of Thor and Thor's hammer from the Marvel Universe world? He has to be worthy, right? He has to be worthy, and so only Thor can hold the hammer. Through the Marvel Universe, Thor gets a new hammer, sort of, okay? And Captain America gets his old one. And isn't it like Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, almost gets it as well too? So in a way, only because Harry is worthy could he get the Sorcerer's Stone. So this is kind of like back to that mythology of that. The same thing with Frodo in the Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings. He doesn't want it for his own power. He is trying to do it for the betterment of everyone around him. And that's the same thing. So that's why Frodo tosses the stone, or the ring into the lake of fire in the volcano. Okay, so that's why Harry gets it as well too. Now, what Quirrell comes after Harry and he touches him, but he can't kill him, right? What happens to Quirrell? Harry jumped to his feet, caught Quirrell by the arm, and hung on as tight as he could. Quirrell screamed and tried to throw Harry off. The pain in Quirrell's head was building. He couldn't see. He could only hear Quirrell's terrible shrieks and Voldemort's yells of kill him, and other voices, maybe in Harry's own head, crying, Harry, Harry. He felt Quirrell's arms wrenched from his grasp, knew all was lost, and fell into dark blackness, down, down, down. Something gold was glinting just above him, the snitch. He tried to catch it, but his arms were too heavy. He blinked. It wasn't the snitch at all. It was a pair of glasses. How strange. He blinked again. The smiling face of Albus Dumbledore swam into view above him. Good afternoon, Harry, said Dumbledore. Okay. Another important moment, right? Harry almost dies. Every hero in the hero's journey must almost die. Harry almost dies. We're almost done with this. And then the last part of the chapter is what we call the denouement. I'll spell it for you. I really need to add on the slide to this. The denouement. What is a denouement? A denouement is the last part of a detective story or wherever all the plots get wrapped up. Usually this happens in like a murder mystery, right? It happens in Sherlock Holmes. It happens here. And everything gets explained to you, right? All the plots are figured out. All the clues are told. And this is Dumbledore's denouement. The only person that does denouements in this series is Dumbledore. Dumbledore does all of books 1 through 5. He does the denouement. In book 6, Dumbledore doesn't do a denouement, but in book 7, Harry Potter does the denouement. Okay, so this is really important that Harry sees this in book 1. In book 7, it is the opposite. It's Harry who does the denouement. Okay, so denouements are very popular in movies, in literature, to have this all wrapped up. How many days is Harry Potter from the time that he goes down, down, down till he wakes up? Yes, Stephanie, 3 days. I'm going to give Stephanie 5 points for today. I'm going to give Valentina 5 points for today for Hufflepuff. And I'm going to give Kaylin 5 points as well too for the Slytherins for answering questions today so far. I'm going to give 5 points to Yvette. Nicely done, you guys. Okay. Have the Ravenclaws answered questions today? I just don't know. I'll have to see. If Ravenclaws haven't answered any questions, I'm going to deduct points. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through that chat. Okay. All right. 3 days. Remember I told you that 7 and 3 was important. 3. Why 3? What's the symbolism of 3? What is the symbolism of 3 days? It's an odd number. It's a trinity. It is religious, Anna. 5 points to Elizabeth as well, too, for the Hufflepuffs. Yes, Valentina. Valentina, that is excellent. It is Jesus' resurrection. This is an allusion. One more time, right? This is an allusion to Jesus' resurrection. This is common in the monomyth, right? Jesus' resurrection, any mythological resurrection usually happens in 3 days. It's common in the Old Testament, the New Testament. It's common in Islamic in the text as well too. It's common in many religious texts that there is somebody who dies and is resurrected in 3 days. Okay. Right. So we get the denouement. So we get the closure of the whole journey, right? We learn a couple different important things. Who killed Quirrell, right? How does Quirrell die? So he tells them the stone is no longer, it's been destroyed. Okay. Quirrell has been killed. How does Quirrell die? Page 299. Your mother died to save you. If there's one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. This is important, the idea of love. comes up at the end of the series in book 7. He didn't realize that love as powerful as your mother's for you leaves its own mark, not a scar, no visible sign. To have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever. It is in your very skin. Quirrell, full of hatred, greed, and ambition, sharing his soul with Voldemort, could not touch you for this reason. It was agony to touch a person marked by something so good. So Harry hasn't been imbued by a spell, a very old spell that his mother cast, imbuing her love into Harry. It's in his very skin and blood. Okay? He dies from family and love. Fast and Furious was I'm sorry. That is very funny. Oh my God. So that is what kills Quirrell. Okay? Now, it's important, a few lessons we get. One, those who leave us, who die, never leave us. If they're dead, they never leave us. A part of them is inside of you, within your memory, within your heart, okay, within your very blood, because genetically, even though they have passed away, you are genetically connected to that person that is a family member. Okay. 2, words are important, right? Harry tries to call Voldemort, you know who, right? And call him Voldemort, Harry. Always use the proper name for things. Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself. So we learn that words are important and you should call things what they are. Okay? He also tells him about truth. The truth, Dumbledore sighed, because Harry says, I'd like to know if you can tell me things I want to know the truth about. The truth, Dumbledore sighed, it is a beautiful and terrible thing and it should therefore be treated with great caution. Right? So why is truth terrible and beautiful? Because it can hurt people and it can help. Right? And the last thing is we learn a little bit about Harry's father. Right, on page 300. This is the first time we have a kind of a conversation about Harry's father. Well, Harry, and then your father did something Snape could never forgive. And Harry says, what is that? And he says, he saved his life. What? Yes, said Dumbledore dreamily. Funny the way people's minds work. Professor Snape couldn't bear being in your father's debt. I do believe he worked so hard to protect you this year because he felt that he could make him and your father even. Then he could go back to hating your father's memory in peace. This is important for book 7. Okay? This is another part of the mirror. The idea of Snape protecting Harry in book 1, we see that again in book 7. What Snape has done to protect Harry, as it's said here. So this concept here is in book 7 as well, and we see it later. Okay, so remember this for book 7, at the end of book 7, when we see Snape at the end of the book. Okay, all right. The other thing he gets is what does Harry get from Hagrid at the hospital? A photo album. Yes, Beans. No. He gives him a photo album. Kaylin, you're funny. Right? He gets all these photos from all of his parents' friends, and he puts them in an album, and on every page is a picture of his parents. And for the first time, Harry, this is that deep connection to what his greatest desire is, his family, and you see it here come to fruition here. Okay. All right. So at the very end, Harry has been done all this and he's redeemed many things. Okay. The first is at the end, Dumbledore grants Dumbledore points. At the end of the term, the candied beans. Oh, the jelly beans. Yes, the Bertie Bott's beans. Okay, at the very end at the Great Hall, at the last feast, Dumbledore grants Dumbledore points. I grant Dumbledore points at the end of the semester. At the end of the semester, I will grant points to people randomly for doing things throughout the semester. I write little notes about you guys. I know who's been answering questions. And sometimes if you're between a B and an A by like a point or two, I will grant you those Dumbledore points, right? So your participation in class, all these little chats that are open, I keep all those and I go back and I kind of check and see, and I grant Dumbledore points. But first, Dumbledore points are granted, 1 for a game well played, okay? 2 points are granted for knowledge, right? And logic. And that's what Hermione gets. So these are reasons to get Dumbledore points: for a game well played, for logic and knowledge, and 3rd, for bravery and courage. And the 4th kind of Dumbledore points that are granted is also for courage. And he says, it takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to your enemies, but just as much to stand up to your friends. I therefore reward 10 points to Mr. Neville Longbottom. Again, it is Neville who wins the House Cup at the end, not Harry Potter. And it is Neville who also wins at the end of book 7. Harry does have a battle with Voldemort, but it is Neville who makes that battle possible for Harry to win. So we see this in book 1 and book 7, and that is the end of the Harry Potter series. Book 1. Woohoo! Book 1 is done. Okay. I am excited. Okay, so we have, oh, I have some time. All right. Let's take a 5-minute break. 5-minute break? Sounds good? 5-minute break, and then we're going to do the hero's journey. And then I'm going to give you a homework assignment for your Hogwarts houses for Friday. I might do that first. Let me pull that file up as well. Take a 5-minute break, everybody.